We landed there, we got a message that we have to carry a live organ. A live organ transplant needed to be done for a particular receiver who was in need of it.
I'll add one thing, like whichever aircraft you fly, it has its own charm.
You ever fired a missile, like a real missile, in an aircraft?
When you see a missile just zoop.
Any one of you join the Air Force thinking अब पढ़ाई नहीं करनी पड़ेगी?
Hi guys, welcome to IF Antara, a series where we interview serving officers of the Indian Air Force.
Today we have 3 officers from the flying branch representing 3 different streams.
First, we have Wing Commander Himanshu Sharma, who flies the ALH Mark III, a multi-role helicopter.
Next, we are joined by Flight Lieutenant Punya Nanjappa, a MiG-29 fighter pilot. As part of the fighter stream, she operates in a domain defined by speed, sharp decision making, and high intensity missions. And finally, we have Flight Lieutenant Desai with 5 years in the service who flies the C-130 transport aircraft. From strategic airlift to operational support, he represents the transport stream. Let's dive into the conversation. Guys, let's start from the beginning. Why the Air Force and why the flying branch?
So I would say it all started as a dream. So when I was a child, I was fascinated by the aircrafts. And when I grew up in my school, I was in a developing school. So I had a very good relationship with my teachers. So one of my teachers, she encouraged me to join Air Force, and she assisted me by giving me the cuttings of the newspaper and introducing me what India is. So after my 12th class, I prepared and got selected for National Defense Academy. And through there, I went to Air Force Academy and joined Flying Branch.
Understood. So it was all because of a teacher who helped you out, and she was your main motivation. Correct. What about you, ma'am?
For me, Air Force started off because I come from South. And South, if you really look at it, we are more aware of the army
Right.
more than the Air Force and Navy, especially in Karnataka. And the first time I witnessed an air show was at my place in Mysore, where my dad took me to this air show, and I had no idea that there was something or some section of the defense services which is called the Air Force. And my dad eventually told me that the men in blue are the ones from the Air Force, and they are the ones who fly these aircraft in the air. And the innocent 9th standard girl just asked, Papa, can I fly this aircraft once when I grow up? So he said, why not? My dad being not aware of that time, not many girls were in the Air Force back then, but very innocently he said, why not? So I think that's where it sparked, and my journey continued from there to this point to joining the Air Force.
So air shows do work as a good publicity material. Perfect. And what about you, sir?
As in my case, I come from a civilian background, but I have always been surrounded by the Air Force in some or the other way. I belong to Nasik. So as you know, HCL is based in Nasik, and also there's a army training establishment called CATS in Nasik. So I've always been surrounded by either helicopters or some of the other news of Air Force in my hometown. So it had always been I have always been exposed to it in my younger school days. Thereafter, when I went to college, again I was associated to my college was near Air Force Station Tambaram.
Which college did you go to, sir?
I studied in VIT Chennai, and yeah, so Air Force Station Tambaram was quite nearby, and so I used to see the Pilatus aircraft flying over my college. And thereafter, I worked for a few months before joining the Air Force Academy.
So you were already working somewhere, and then you gave your FCAT exam.
So in my case, like I gave my FCAT exam not immediately after I passed out from my graduation. It was after 6 months. So in that 6 months also, I had some exposure of near Pune, Loegaon.
Right.
So I have always been some or the other way associated with Air Force or some sort of flying, and the passion for flying and the military as a kid is always there. So I just added.
Lakshan Top Gun देख के बढ़िया लग गया. Alright, so all 3 of you come from a non-military background. Is that correct? So then, when you were preparing for AFCAT, SSB, India exam, was there any challenges you guys faced? कि पता नहीं था क्या होता है, कैसे करना था? Like, how did you guys navigate through that?
For me, additionally, I added advantages. I used to do a lot of adventure activities. So in my school, there was one instructor who used to take us to these activities, who introduced me to NCC. So I was in the 11th when I joined NCC for the first time, the Air Wing. So my orientation towards how to join the Air Force came through NCC, because you are surrounded by a lot of Air Force officers in the camp, and they give you a first-hand understanding of how defense services is, and how do you orient yourself through writing the exam. What degree do you need to take to get in the exam? So for me, NCC was a plus point, so that I was very sure of what qualifications that I need to take and how do I prepare for the exam, and what do I do after joining the Air Force.
Understood. So you're with certificate NCC mein, I'm assuming there are 3
Yeah, there's
certificates.
till C certificate, and
You are
additionally you get to do this All India Vayu Sainik camp and all of that, where you get to fly the microlights as a competition where you represent your directorate.
so in NCC you were allowed to fly
I-
the microlight, the white aircraft,
Yes.
the glider type का होता है.
Yes. And being a 16-year-old at that point, getting to fly an aircraft for free for the first
Yeah,
time.
you flew the aircraft.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So you basically compete with the other directorates when you go for this competition, which is held by NCC.
Okay,
So that's a very beautiful opportunity for youngsters to understand aviation.
obviously.
And
Mm.
NCC being a platform open for all,
Mm.
there's no entrance exam. You just have to go there and attend certain camps and train yourself. So it gives you a first-hand experience of flying without actually spending any money.
So your first aircraft was the microlight, then you were on the Pilatus,
Yes.
then you were on the
Kiran's.
Kirans,
Then we go to the Hawks for our advanced training. And
advanced
then we
jet, and
go
then
to-
you're currently you're on the MiG-29s. And what about you, sir?
So for me, as I already told you, it was through assisted by my teacher. However, it was a lot of self-searching. So there's a newspaper called Employment Newspaper. So you get the ad of UPSC examination in that. So I searched through the newspapers and prepared through the books towards the preparation of my India examination.
Understood. And what about you, sir? Joining the corporate world, 6 months, वहाँ पे morning check-in, check-out, login के बाद.
It was more or less like I referred to some books for the AFCAT and CDSE entrance exams, but that was just for the theory part, the entrance exam. For SSB per se, I would say that if you have it in you, it helps. And if, let's say, unfortunately, let's say if you don't make it in the first attempt, taking guidance from someone who is selected and who is in the training stages or has already been commissioned as an officer, just getting some guidance from them, as there are some things called OLQs. So you just need to be aware.
OLQs are?
Officer-like qualities. So if you have an idea if you take guidance basically from someone who is there, who has made it through, so talking to such person helps. So I would say.
So we should have like to add to him when he says, if you have it in you. So it was not my first attempt that I got selected. So I had to face it 5 times. So it was my 5th attempt in which I made it through the SSB. So it took me a lot of preparation. And from my 3rd attempt, when I got rejected in my conference, so SSB has 2 stages. One is screening and then it is a conference. So in the first 2 attempts, I was screened out. 3rd attempt, I reached till conference, but I couldn't still make it. So when I came back 3rd time, then I joined, I took guidance. My father took me to some retired brigadier. So they guided me, what is the procedure, what is a thing called OLQs, and what are they looking in you at that time. So where you should put efforts, like you should not put all the efforts in physical thing which happens in SSB. So there's psychology, there's your general knowledge, and then there comes outdoor activities. So it's a combination of everything. So that's how I got guidance, and finally, probably in the 4th and 5th attempt, I made it to India and Naval Academy. Both the letters I had in my hand
And then you chose.
when I chose
Right,
National
right.
Naval Academy.
So men in white se men in blue हो गए आप. So coming from VIT Chennai, the Air Force Academy must have been quite a shock to you. Please tell me about that.
Quite a change, I would say. Like from college life or let's say corporate life, once you enter the academy, it's all very systematic and planned out there. So every hour of the day it's fixed what you'll do, how you'll do. There are people who are looking after it, that it happens in that particular way. You're from the time you wake up till the time you go back to sleep again at night. Every hour, every minute is basically planned, and it would comprise of the day would comprise of physical training classes. Then as
You go forward, the flying would start.
stage where you fly, so the people would be engaged in flying in stages, batches, you would say. And all out of all this, now you have to find time to study, give your
So
exam.
that is all independent. कि खुद ढूंढो time, खुद पढ़ो. वो
self
लोग-
study is independent, but
Self-study is independent.
classes are conducted.
Yeah,
That's
right. Classes, theoretical classes like a college जैसे रहेगा.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Air Force Academy really prepares you for the life ahead. that's whatever.
We'll come to the life a little longer. Ma'am, what about you? How's the AFA different? Which college did you go to, ma'am? So
I
sorry.
went to National Institute of Engineering, Mysore.
Okay.
So I finished my engineering, and the year after my 4th year is when I joined. Academy was more of just imagine a situation where you passed out with your, say, college mate, and now he joined 6 months before. He's your senior when you go to academy.
Oh, right.
And then there, suddenly you've changed from calling him by name to sir,
So,
ma'am. So that's probably a different phase of situation when you come from a civil background to
Correct.
the military disciplining, where you understand that you need to take orders, you need to do it meticulously with a lot of discipline. And the beauty of Air Force Academy is it actually makes you understand that you can actually schedule a lot of things in one day. Because as engineers, semester end exams are here, so last minute, one night, all night you sit and study. That night or that day you don't go to play, you don't go watching a movie,
No partying,
nothing,
no
no
nothing.
partying, nothing. But when you come to academy, the perspective just changes because you schedule everything. You schedule your games, you schedule classes, you schedule your study periods, and you also participate in a lot of sports activities, your sports events, and also you have time for yourself, having dinner, having lunch with your course mates. Everything is scheduled in one day, though you have an exam tomorrow.
No one cares about the exam. As in, they will care about the results,
Yeah,
but
they do.
time management is your game.
Time management is taught to you.
Oh, okay.
The training is so placed that time management is a part of the day, where you know that between 4 to 5 you need to be at the PT ground. Between 10 to 12 you are at your classes.
Correct.
You need to finish your lunch by 4. So that you're getting into that discipline mode right from the beginning. And once you when it actually hits you is when you come and join the Air Force as an officer.
Right.
So there's so many responsibilities that an officer has to hold. And now when you go back to your training and you understand that in a day I did so many things and why is it not possible now? That's where it actually plays its game.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right. So these two were coming from the corporate/civil world. So you were part of the NDA.
Yeah,
So
Defense
National Defense Academy in Pune. So coming from that AFA, what was the difference?
So as far as I went to AFA, the difference is not much because all the academies have their own standards and they have their own curriculum. Like they have number of cadets who have joined and they have to pass out in the time frame. So everything depending upon the kind of academy it is, like National Defense Academy builds the basic in you.
Right. For 3 years. Correct.
As far as I go, I went to Air Force Academy from National Defense Academy. So at NDA, we were taught to a young cadet who's just 17 years old. He's turned into a man. He's turned into an officer over there. So once I went to AFA, it was a paradigm shift in my mind where we are taught that only a male doesn't become an officer. It's not about the gender. It's about the qualities that you develop, the skills that you develop, and capability. It is irrespective of your gender, and you become an officer.
Understood.
That was the major shift into AFA from National Defense Academy, where only at my time, only boys were there. So now you see that girls are joining the National Defense Academy.
Understood. So NDA is a 3-year course, correct?
India is a 3 years course and it's a tri-service organization.
So Army, Navy, Air Force, 3 train together.
Yeah,
for the-
all 3 train together and it builds the basics in the cadet. And after that, we went to our professional academies like Air Force cadets go to Air Force Academy, Naval go to Naval Academy, and Army cadets go to Indian Military Academy, Dehradun.
Well, so one basic question. How does someone choose the flying branch? How does someone decide कि मेरे को C-130 उड़ाना है?
You choose the flying branch when you are preparing for your AFCAT, when you are filling out the forms.
वहीं पे टिक मार दिया है कि I'm going to join the flying branch.
Preferences are being asked to you. You choose your preferences based on your graduation eligibilities.
Correct.
What kind of graduation you have done. Thereafter, your subjects in +2. That's what matters. You just need to have physics and maths and with 60% or more marks. Or the criteria would change as per time, but that's what was there at my time. So based on that criteria, your eligibility will be defined and then you fill out the forms. The preferences basically, I mean to say. So what I was eligible was flying branch, administration, logistics. So you have to choose your priorities. You have to choose that
1, 2,
first set,
3.
yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in that there are, for ground duty branches, there are short service and permanent commission, both options are there. But for AFCAT flying, it is all short service commission.
Alright. So you both are short service officers,
Both are.
and so you're PC.
So all this information is available in the same newspaper which I brought out.
Right. So the notification is what
DA,
taught you guys.
and NCC special entry are the permanent commission entries.
Okay, in the flying branch. Alright. And once you join as short service, is there like an exchange? Oh, how many years is the short service commission?
For flying branch, it is a mandatory undertaking of 14 years.
14 years. Okay.
You would say service of 14 years.
Okay. So 9 years more for you to go. And ma'am, for you?
Same. We both are course-mates.
Oh, you both are course-mates. Okay, okay.
And then depending on the vacancy that Air Force has, they can choose for a permanent commission also.
Okay.
So when you're nearing to your 13th or 14th year of service is when you start applying for a permanent commission if you still want to continue.
Alright. And what decides that PC milega, nahi milega?
Vacancies and
merit.
Vacancies, merit, the requirement of service, and those factors will define that.
Understood. Alright. So now that is how you chose the flying branch, starting with format mare.
Then based on the AFCAT score and your SSB score, you keep on getting selected for the next level. So after your SSB, if let's say you are filled up for the flying branch, there is a test called CPSS, Computerized Pilot Selection System. So in that, if you pass that test, that particular test, you would be eligible for flying branch. And this is just like that particular test that I'm talking about. You can just appear for it once in your life, in your entire attempts, how many ever attempts you make for your service entry.
Alright. So you gave your SSB 5 times. All tri services. Tino mein. If you don't make it for the Air Force,
because SSB is same for all three services.
right, the standards are the same, everything.
No, the SSP is tri-service.
Okay, AFSB is, but still, CPSS and PABT is once in a lifetime. So, पहली 4 बार आपने नहीं दिया था.
Yes, it was the 5th attempt which was for NDA. First 3 attempts were for something else, something called 10+2 technical entry scheme, which can be given on the basis of your 10+2 exams.
So the first time if you're giving SSB and now it's only after your 4 days of interview, once you've been shortlisted, is when you go give your the
CPSS or
PSS or PAVT. And then if you don't make it, you have your second, third, fourth options which you can get into.
Right, the branches just have bola ki next jo tick mark mara. What is the test exactly like? Is it a written test?
Video game. See, we would have made it sound so, oh my god, this is life in once in a lifetime opportunity. इसको clear नहीं किया तो नहीं हो पाएगा. It is a video game. What they're trying to check is your psychomotoric skills and how are your eye and hand coordination. And I think this generation is pretty good at it.
We'll go on Pilatus, Kiran, Hawks, MiG-29.
Pilot is followed by Dornier. Thereafter, the streams have been selected. Post your transport conversion course. It's called TCC, Transport Conversion Course. Post your completion of that course, your which fleet you will go to is decided based on, again, requirements, aptitude, and all those things.
Everything is on list बनेगी, आपका merit देखा जाएगा.
So merit will be for ground subjects as well as flying. So based on that, a consolidated ranking system is decided and the fleet is decided that way.
What about you, sir? आपने क्या क्या?
I'll say microlight is important because I started with Super Demona. It's a glider kind of aircraft. It's in National Defense Academy.
Okay.
So in a 6th term over there, after we finished off 2.5 years of ground training or the military training, the 6th term is very specific to your branches. Like Army cadets get only trained for Army subjects.
Specific subjects.
So
right.
similarly, Air Force cadets get trained only for Air Force subjects.
Right.
So in those 6 months, I flew Super Demona. And then I went to Air Force Academy where I flew Kiran Mark 1 and 1 Alpha.
No Pilatus.
No, the Pilatus were not there at my time.
Okay,
so I got
so
permission in 2010. And they're probably in 2020, 10 years.
Okay.
And then after that, I went to Bidar where I flew Hawk Mark 132. And then I went to HTS where I did my helicopter training in the basic aircraft Chetak and Cheetah.
Right.
And finally, my first posting was in Tesur where I flew the same aircraft. And now I'm in LH Mark 3.
LH Mark 3, right. So many different aircraft coming from, like, I'm assuming it's not the same, like, Toyota में बैठे same गाड़ी है, Honda में बैठे same ही है. कुछ तो must be very different, right? Like controls are इधर उधर left right.
It's not like driving a car or any four-wheeler.
हाँ ये मुझे ABC पता है मैं चला
To
जाऊँगा.
drive a particular car, it's not that I can go to that car and start driving. Like you have to undergo some. There's something called MCF. It's you are taught the basics of every machine. What are the switches? What are the systems on board? If something malfunctions, what do you do? Basically, कुछ गड़बड़ हो गया तो क्या करना है? Is what is taught, and the limitations of every aircraft are told to you. Things like that. So post that, then you undergo a simulator for that aircraft. After the particular course on the simulator, you will be flying the real aircraft. So that's what the process is involved in every aircraft. and then you are type trained on that aircraft. So it's not like, let's say for my case, I would say if I'm Dornier trained, then immediately I can start and go and start flying AN32. It's not like that. There's a
Right.
process that
You'll
is
start with the ground training, then do the simulator training for AN32, then actually flying the AN32.
correct.
Okay.
And there's a basic standard that you have to achieve starting from your ground preparation, that is MCF. You have to pass that exam with certain amount of marks, and then you go to simulator where you are given a number of sorties only. See, the assets, the time, everything is limited for the country, so we can't give 100 sorties to cadet or a.
correct.
So there's only particular number of sorties. So in those sorties, you're expected to come prepared, and that's why it's very tasking for a cadet who's just understanding how to fly. And you have to then achieve limited a certain amount of certain standard for flying,
Right.
and then you are progress to actual aircraft.
Understood. How many hours did you have on the Pilatus in the Air Force Academy?
So the course, in the stage 1 of our flying course, we generally accumulate 52 to 56 hours.
How many stages are there?
There are 2 stages.
Two stages.
So in stage 1, we all fly pilotus. In stage 2, some of the trainees stay back on pilotus, and some of those who are going to fight us might continue on pilotus, or they'll go to the Kiran aircraft. For those who are going into the other fleets like helicopters and transport, will go on their particular like Dornier or the ALH. Correction, the Cheetah Chetak.
Cheetah. Understood.
To add on, when he says 52 hours in first sem of training, na? So very funny incident. Once a sem 1 person has finished his Pilatus syllabus, now you think you can fly. So after your first 6 months, you go back home for a short break.
Right.
Now when you sit in a civil airline
Uh-huh.
and you go back home,
You're
like
giving.
you're waiting, like any pilot on board, please substitute. But at that point, you really don't realize when you said how different is a cockpit. So as a SEM 1 trainee, I was like, yaar, uda lo.
Correct.
Koi tension.
You're waiting for that emergency.
First time I saw a cockpit inside, I was like, most of the fighters and a Pilatus, when you're going on a training, it's a single stick.
Right.
The way he takes off is a different kind of
Right.
takeoff. Where sir, his takeoff is never like this. His takeoff is probably this.
I have a question, ma'am. Is flying a fighter jet thoda movie type, Top Gun type say, or is it a little bit more serious? Because once you're in the cockpit, must be press this button, press that button, very structured. Or is it freebird solo lagaya and flying?
No, every time you sit in the cockpit, there's a lot of preparation which goes into sitting in the cockpit, because especially when it's a single cockpit fighter, the task which is in hand for a particular mission is multiple. So you need to be very aware on what switches that I operate, or because I am traveling at say 400 kilometers per hour, 600 kilometers per hour, and everything is happening seconds. One switch that I operate, if it is incorrect, the objective that I had to achieve, I might miss it. Probably I had to do something which was very critical and I'm not prepared for it. It doesn't happen. So a Top Gun, if I as a pilot am sitting outside, when I am looking at it, I'm in the Top Gun mode.
Correct.
But
When you're inside, yes,
doing
you're there.
But when I'm inside, I'm the most disciplined pilot who's sitting inside.
You said single-seater aircraft. What is a single-seater aircraft in
So,
fighters? Like,
Just to give you an example, if you've ever seen a Su-30,
yeah, right.
so we have a twin seat. There's a tandem seat.
So there are two pilots in it.
Yeah, so there is a WSO who's sitting behind,
Okay.
who's the weapon system operator.
That person is not a pilot. That person is not
Yes,
flying.
He's trained to operate the nav systems and the weapon systems of the aircraft.
All right.
Whereas the captain is always a pilot.
Okay.
So in a single cockpit,
You're doing
you are the
everything.
WSO and you are the pilot.
Right.
So everything is done by you.
So I would like to add to that, like she spoke about single cockpit. So in helicopters, generally we have side-by-side seating, and it's a multi-crew cockpit. So we have a captain, we have a co-pilot, and in many aircrafts we have a gunner, or the one who manages the cargo, the cargo where the load is kept, where the passengers are there. So it's a multi-crew cockpit.
How many people can your helicopter carry?
My helicopter at sea level can carry 16.
16 people. So there'll be 3 crew members in the helicopter plus
13 troops.
13
Total
troops,
16.
or if you're rescuing people, 13 more. All right. What is the tonnage? Like, is there like a load here?
Which is 5.5 ton aircraft.
Which means it is 5.5 tons, or
All of weight, max all of weight of the aircraft is 5.5 ton. So with the fuel which I carry, and I have to commute from place A to place B, I can carry 13 people with me.
Right. So that is a maximum weight of 5.5 tons.
5.5.
That must be the weight of the fuel you're carrying in your C-130.
Even more than that.
Even more than that.
Much more than that.
How much fuel do you carry at full capacity?
At full capacity, it is 64,000 pounds, I would say, which is, you can say, 30 tons, close to 30 tons.
30 tons, right. What is the endurance of a C-130 aircraft? Like
Longest that the Indian Air Force has done is 13 hours, 30 minutes.
continuously?
However, if the mission demands endurance, then certain settings that we can do on board will take it even longer. Since we have external tanks and other transport aircraft also have provisions of external tanks or let's say tanks on board. So the profile demands, so
It can go more than 13 also if the need arises. And आप लोगों
It's not about only about how much fuel or how much the weight that you can carry. It's about where that weight you can deliver. So it said like the feeling of hovering in air, standing in air, it's a different one. So we say that we don't require runways.
right.
So we say like to fly is human, but to hover is divine. So the helicopters, like they can go to far-flung places in mountains where the runways are not there.
Have you ever landed, sir, on like a non-helipad?
So that's a regular training that we give to our trainees. That's called RRA, Rough and Restricted Area Operations. So where we train them to land the aircraft at a place where they have never seen it. So it's not that they can just go and land. So there is a lot of there's a procedure for that. So they look for specifically small cables which can get entangled with your tail rotor or main rotor and can become catastrophic in nature. So that's why this is a very important training that's given to any helicopter pilot, and specifically while you're flying in valleys, in hills. So if you have any malfunction, so you don't have helipads to land at all places. So you'll have to land or carry out an emergency landing at any area which is like near a riverbed, or it's just an open area.
So the ground is not stable.
The ground is not
you
even,
don't
it's
know-
undulating.
You don't know how many rocks are there. How will your
Exactly,
helicopter land on
exactly.
it? Right.
So
I'm
that's
assuming
the-
the MiG-29 doesn't have these problems. You just land on the best runways, land on the most.
Not really, because we also do operate at the northern areas like Leh or Thois. So the game there is terrain, atmosphere, and now an additional factor of our speed.
So
So
what is the fastest you've flown up in a fighter?
we go close to about 1.6 Mach, but the
Mach
aircraft
is speed of sound. Mach 1 would be speed of sound. Right. So
So-
कितना होगा kilometers per hour में? मोटा
1800 kilometers per hour, close to about that. And maximum that the aircraft can go is 2.2. So in the fleet, there are certain test profiles where we actually push it up to 2 Mach.
two times the speed
Yeah.
of more than two
More
times,
than
is,
two times
is
the
the speed of sound.
So with all these considerations, now when you operate in such a terrain, it's very difficult because now you need to manage your speeds, and the terrain is such that the runway is between the valleys, and you need to position yourself deep between those valleys, and then land the aircraft.
What is your favorite airfield that you've landed on, ma'am? Is like there, do pilots get like a common airfield? I love landing on this airfield. ये मेरे को
You can choose. You have options all over. But for me, it would be Thois.
Twice. This is in up north.
Yeah,
Up north.
Close to
right.
it.
Understood.
add on to that, I would like to just say that C-130 holds the record of being the heaviest at the highest. By that I mean that the C-130 holds the Limca Book of Record of landing at the highest ALG, Advanced Landing Ground in the world.
Okay.
So landing at airfields above 10,000 feet is a challenge. 10,000 feet above mean sea level altitude,
Right.
which holds a different challenge altogether of the higher you go, your true airspeed increases. And as you were saying that landing in the airfields up north is quite tricky. So it is tricky in the terms of landing speeds also. As anyone would have seen that if you have flown as a passenger in a civil aircraft, while landing you would see that how fast the aircraft is.
Right.
So at higher altitudes that even feels faster. It feels faster and it is faster actually.
All right.
So the amount of landing distance you require, it increases drastically. And some of these ALGs that I mentioned are not fully paved. They are partially prepared. They're like dirt strips. So as
So
you
like
were saying
driving on
that-
Gurgaon roads, वैसा type का.
so there is since like aircraft are nowadays these days are quite FOD resistant. FOD, by FOD I mean foreign object debris. So the aircraft are quite FOD resistant, but it holds that.
So FOD is what, like a piece of rock on the runway?
The airstrip could be a dirt strip. It could be unpaved. So there could be small amounts of pebbles and dust
Right,
or
correct.
sand particles could be suspended in the air, right? तो वो अगर
So the C-130 lands on that.
yeah, the aircraft is capable of doing that. And from coming from the ALGs down to the sea level, if I say like you has someone traveled from Agra to Lucknow, had we if you would have noticed, there is a patch of the highway which suddenly expands. If people would
I saw it on the news. They were landing.
so there
They
are
were landing.
expressway landing fields or emergency landing fields, ELFs as they are called. So the undertaking landings at such airfields is a requirement of the modern day. So let's say the aircraft is in such a condition that it can't make it to a nearest suitable airfield. So such suitable strips of highways or expressways are kept ready so that an aircraft, whichever it may be, helicopter, transport fighter, can carry out an emergency.
Helicopter तो can land anywhere. I think.
Another thing that I would like to say, like she brought out the charm of fighter is speed,
Right.
and the charm of transport is the long endurance flying.
Correct.
So for helicopter, it is, imagine the vicinity of flying. Imagine you are flying close to snow-clad peaks over lush green jungles,
You're
and
seeing
you are
them.
able to see the ground as a slower speed, and you are able to appreciate the beauty.
Right.
So that's the beauty of flying a helicopter. Like I've flown in the glacier also, which is you would have heard the highest battlefield in the world.
Siachen.
Yeah, exactly. So I've flown. I have the opportunity to fly over there. So not the and then I had flown in the length and breadth of Himalayas, like in the Uttar Bharat hills in Uttarakhand, and now I'm flying in the east in the Himalayas. So it has its own beauty.
They get to see nature, and we, get the thrill of it because you're going at like 750 kilometers, and especially it's not a single aircraft that goes in
Right, it'll be
valley. You have a
multiple air-
number two.
Okay.
And I think it would be the best sortie for a number two because for him, it is an additional thing to maintain formation with his leader who is ahead of him at a speed of, say, 700 to 800 kilometers per hour and cutting between valleys, which is like your turns are in seconds. So you miss, it's a very different situation altogether. So it's a very critical sortie for, especially
So
when we.
when you're making these high speed turns, like others, like there's something called G forces, right?
Yeah.
So 1G would be what we are experiencing right now.
Yeah.
So what is the highest G force that you would experience?
We go through about 7 to 8 Gs, but we're trained for up to 9 Gs.
How you train for 9Gs?
So
How
there
does
is
someone
a
train?
special setup in Bangalore, which is called the OpTram,
Okay.
where all pilots go through a training for sustaining Gs,
All fighter pilots or all pilots?
all fighter pilots.
All fighter pilots specifically.
So it's a chamber and they simulate an aircraft and you have your certain suits that you wear when you fly. It's called the G suit, which gives you an additional tolerance towards G.
G
And
is
there's certain,
G is for gravity.
Yeah.
Okay.
so, and there's certain maneuvers that you need to carry out as in terms of your breathing. So you'll have to tighten your core and breathe out in a particular way so that whenever you're turning, the additional force that your body is going through, that is basically it is pushing your blood. So what happens biologically is your blood is now stuck at the lower portion.
Knee
It's
level,
not
let's say.
coming up to your brains.
Right.
So the G force, what happens, it actually doesn't let your brain have that blood which needs to keep you active.
So no blood in the brain means no oxygen in the brain.
No oxygen and you go unconscious. So it's called G-lock,
G
which no pilot wants to be in.
Right. Has that ever happened to you?
When you train, but not in the
No,
cockpit.
no, yeah, I'm talking about that.
Optram.
That
Optram, yes.
Right.
It is, most of them go through it because you need to understand what is it to get into a G-lock.
Correct. You know
So
what
that
is
you
the
don't get
symptom.
there.
Yeah, you know the symptoms properly.
When you pass that Optram course, you get a 9G cap. You become a member of 9G club.
90 club. Oh, nice.
Vishnu, I'll add one thing. Like whichever aircraft you fly, it has its own charm. It has its own individuality. But like we say, when you become a pilot or a flyer, so there's a code. So they say like once you have tasted flight, you'll always walk the earth with your sky upwards because there you have been and there you'll always belong to be there.
Military aviation in general seems like a very dangerous job. But I'm sure there is a lot of structures and procedures that you guys follow to make it a little bit safer. Right? Would you like to add on that? Like, how does it work?
So like Punya already brought out that you are the most disciplined in the cockpit.
Correct.
And so for any organization, like you're talking about military aviation, discipline is the bedrock of any successful organization.
Correct.
So there are lots and lots of checks and procedures, and there are one examining body and one inspecting body, which is continuously checking us for our standards and pushing us to enlarge and expand our capabilities.
Correct.
So one body is there which which examines us every year and forces us, or rather makes us to achieve the highest standards of flying. So for everyday flying in a unit, we build up our experiences,
Alright.
and then we have to undergo exam every year for all the streams: fighter, transport, and helicopter.
So when was your last examination?
My last exam was in Jan.
Alright.
So the cycle would be from Jan to Jan for me in particular. But every aircrew would have it in their particular cycle throughout the years.
Right.
And like these exams are in place for certain checks and balances.
Right.
Along with that, like I would just like to add one thing. Like her cockpit, she said she's a single seat cockpit. But for multi-crew cockpit, there's something called a CRM, which you need to maintain.
CRM
because
would be
crew resource management. So what
Okay.
happens is when there are multiple crew involved, there has to be a synergy in the cockpit. And for that, the synergy amongst the crew members will bring out the result of the mission that is required or oriented.
What is the crew strength in a C-130
For
aircraft?
C-130, minimum required is 3, but we operate with 4.
So 3 would be one pilot,
two
co-pilot,
pilots, pilot, co-pilot.
and
The third mandatory one is the flight engineer, as we
Right.
call him, the load master.
Load
And the
master.
fourth one is the navigator. But in our fleet, we call it a CSO, combat systems operator.
understood.
That's a fleet specific term.
So I'm assuming in a C-130 aircraft where the endurance is so long, you guys change, like have different crew sets, different pilots in the same aircraft?
Yeah, correct. So for C-130, C-17, that class of aircraft,
Right.
the
Larger cargo.
larger class of long endurance class of aircraft, we generally carry an extra set of crew. So so as to manage the crew fatigue.
Right.
And
So it's a
respirates are being catered in
limited
that.
number of hours only a pilot can.
Yeah,
So this all comes under the safety checks and balances that
correct.
nothing goes wrong.
And this is also part of the crew resource management, as I said.
Right.
Getting optimum result out of the set of crew and the mission.
Right.
This is the planning is done in such a way that, let's say a set of crew starts the mission, but as soon as their duty period is approaching the end, they will hand over the duties to the second set of the crew, and they will continue the mission. So at the end of the day, the goal is achieved not even by exceeding the duty period. So
Right.
because human fatigue is a factor which has to be catered.
When you talk about risk taking capability of an individual pilot, so we are trained every day on daily basis in our briefing rooms,
Right.
where a morning briefing has a concept where the Met officer comes and briefs us about the morning weather, and the ATC officer comes and tells us about the runway conditions, available diversions. And then comes the squad briefing session in which the pilots sit and discuss about a particular emergency and the actions to be taken for that emergency. The sole reason for this is whenever the pilot is walking to the aircraft,
Right.
he or she is confident that they can take the actions in
Right.
air no matter what the
If
situation.
any random situation comes up, they're slightly prepared.
Yes.
Is simulation training, how similar would you say simulation training to the actual flight? Like, can you are our simulators exactly what the cockpit feels like, at least in terms of the button I'm pressing?
Yes.
Everything can be simulated.
Yeah. The operations of the cockpit are very similar,
Right.
but of course the flying
The
conditions.
flying
would
conditions can be made, the
vary.
G-forces, the speed.
Advantage of a simulator is that you cannot simulate an engine of an air, right?
Right.
You can't do it.
Right.
But in a simulator, you can get those kind of experiences which you cannot simulate in air. So that builds up the confidence and gives the experience to the pilot to land that kind of emergency. So like for a helicopter, I have a simulator which gives me the condition as equal to as actual flying. So in that I can simulate both engine failure, which actually I can.
Yeah, correct.
And there are certain conditions where we cannot simulate because these conditions are called, which are quite risky, like while taking off and landing. You can't simulate because at that time the pilot is completely focused on taking action if anything goes wrong, because
Right.
the decision making time is very less at that time. Those conditions can be simulated in all kind of simulators,
All simulators.
and that's how you prepare for that.
Right. So all those movies you see where the bird has hit the engine, all those things you can simulate.
So certainly, your simulators these days are quite state of the art. So there are levels of simulators. So the most modern would be the CAT-D simulators, which are full flight simulators. So in that, basically the real feel of the air, how an aircraft would feel in the air, is quite, I would say, 95 to 99% replicated. And in that, now you can also practice atmospheric conditions, which you can't do in air, right?
Right.
Because let's say if there's a thing called wind shear,
Wind shear,
wind shear.
which is what wind I'm facing when I'm going forward.
Like you would have seen, like there's a type of cloud, that's CB. It's called the CB. So in the CB, there is a high amount of downdraft, and if let's say once an aircraft is
Downdraft is something that pushes my aircraft down.
Strong down.
yeah, so
Okay.
and it there are 3 stages. So it would be too much technicality, but so there's a certain amount of downdraft, downforce when you, and the thing is, this would be in a particular runway logo flight where the aircraft is very at a slow speed, that is just coming for landing or after takeoff. So that cannot be replicated in the real aircraft, which is possible in a simulator. So once someone is trained for that, let's say God forbid it happens in a real aircraft someday. So the person is prepared for that. And the nature of emergencies that would come up in a aircraft with multiple avionic systems is you can't predict today what might go wrong. So the simulator trains you for all sorts of emergencies, like from hydraulic to electrical, anything to anything.
Right. So even a pilot who is currently flying is qualified on a C-130 or your respective aircraft, you are also going on the simulator again and again. Like, can you go on a simulator right now?
Currency for simulator that you have to maintain.
Okay.
So it can be monthly or biannual.
And is there a set number of flying hours that you have to follow in a, no, I'm talking about real actual flying. Is there like a set number of hours in a month? Or what is it like?
So
In a period of 3 months or so. It depends on field to field, but again,
How many hours of flying do you have total?
total 1200 hours.
On the C-130 or
Pura together. On C-130, I have 950 to 1000 hours.
1000 hours? Ma'am, what about you?
for me, it's total 600 hours of flying, and a MiG-29 is about 250 hours.
250 hours on a MiG-29. What is an average sortie for a MiG-29? Like,
So one
start to
sortie
finish it?
from takeoff to touchdown, in case I am not carrying any additional fuel on board, is about 45 minutes.
alright.
But in case I have additional fuel on board, it's about 2.5 hours.
So you have about, let's say, 1 hour of flying. Then you have pre-brief before, and you have a post-brief. So,
So
3
the-
hours of briefing for 1 hour of flying.
Yeah, 2 hours of briefing, 45 minutes,
That's a-
you come back, you debrief, and then you brief for another sortie. So it's not like you're not done with one sortie by the day. You can fly about 3 sorties by a day. And there are like different profiles. You do some combat sorties where you're going with another aircraft to actually get close aerial combat. Or then you do long range sorties where...
How do we simulate aerial combat? Like, we are not firing on anyone. So how do you fire a missile? Who do you fire?
avionics have systems where you can actually get weapons on the system.
Right.
You're simulating that weapon.
Alright. So like a missile lock on a potential
Yes.
aircraft that is
So,
acting as a
I think
enemy.
most of them are very familiar with this DCS, which
Right.
is available online.
Combat
So-
simulator.
How you can set up a particular cockpit, you can actually do it in an aircraft where your mission computers are capable of simulating certain missiles. So the best part is, especially in your close combat sorties, which is a game changer for a fighter pilot when you take. So we brag about taking kills in air as fighter pilots.
Right.
So once you come back, the first thing you're very happy about, no matter what other violations that you would have done, is taking that
First kill.
right?
Like if you come on the aircraft as a
Yeah,
shock.
your
someone
name
gets
is on the
aircraft-
board.
Oh, okay.
for that day.
Right.
2 kills on you, 3 kills on you.
One, what are you killing? What are you hitting?
So we have certain missiles that we carry and we simulate that we're... So one is the Red Force, that he's the opponent. It's a game.
It's a game.
So
right? Simulated
he's the
game.
opponent. Both of us, the profile is to kill each other in close combat.
Right.
That's the game.
You can actually make out, like, once after the profile is over and they're coming back, and when they're walking towards you can see who had the kill, like Yankee with a chain a little bit down and collar up.
The game is, in case he's a senior. So
Right.
suppose I'm doing my training and he's the leader
Right.
and I'm going with him. I take a kill on him. The debrief room is another situation because he's going to give all valid points that it was not a valid kill, and the other person is like, you're down.
Right.
There's no denial on that.
Understood. So, have you ever fired a missile, like a real missile, in an aircraft?
So we have trainings of these where certain drones are airborne,
Okay.
and there are certain profiles that we practice.
They're moving targets
They're
up in
moving
the air.
targets, and we take missile hits on these, or say air-to-air gun launches on these. I think it's those sorties that the younger lot of the squadron wait for,
Right.
because it's once in a lifetime opportunity where you actually get to fire an actual missile.
Right.
Unless and until, of course, it is the D-Day.
Yeah.
When you're practicing, getting these sorties and these profiles are challenging because it's only one missile. And it's only one chance that you get.
Right.
You miss it, then you'd feel sorry about it.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you need to come back and give a
And-
justification that why did you miss that profile.
So everything is evaluated again and again.
Yeah, you
everything.
train, you do your... So we have this thing as pilots to do something called chair flying. So before going for a sortie, I'm going to simulate a place where I'm sitting in a cockpit and I'm going to practice from the time I am walking to the aircraft till I come and touch down. What am I going to do? So I simulate, okay, this is my throttle. I'm going to move the throttle in this particular
So right
way.
now, if you close your eyes, you can imagine the whole cockpit in front of you. Like each and every button, you know, यहाँ पे gauge होगा, fuel gauge होगा.
So we
you know.
do this 10 times before we go sit in the cockpit. So it's not always, you get a profile and you just walk. There's a lot of preparation behind having a successful mission. Especially when you were talking about like air-to-air missile. It's in seconds that these things happen, especially when you're airborne, and it's only once that the drone is going to get airborne. You need to get a lock and you need to fire.
Fire that missile.
And you have to get the result. It has to be a hit.
Right.
So the most satisfying part after you come down is when you actually see the result. When you see your missile just zoop down your wing and then you see it traveling and make that direct hit is when you actually feel proud that
So you see the kill happening, like you see the explosion in
sometimes
front of
it
you.
depends on the kind
range,
of
right.
weapon that you're
And
carrying.
the range.
But when you're doing some close range weapon firing and especially guns. So the best part about firing guns in air, it's like if I take an example of when you're doing firing on ground.
Right.
So you have a target paper and
right.
you're standing still. You remember if you have to get a good shot, you need to stand still, take care of your breathing. Now imagine at a speeds of 400 kilometers per hour and the aircraft is
moving.
traveling.
The other aircraft is also
other
moving.
drone is
also moving.
I need to get into a particular position and then fire guns which actually shakes the aircraft apart.
Oh, okay.
And my target as a pilot is to get the maximum number of hits. And everything is in motion. You need to get those hits on the target. And come back and, of course, proudly say that, 80 hits on board. So that is a very exciting part of this profession.
Understood. Alright. So I'm assuming when you guys go up for a sortie with your families, especially, they must be a little concerned / worried. So is it like a text you guys shoot family group pe, okay, now I've landed, sortie completed, or is it like there's no communication with your families? Do you guys have any personal thing?
At times the day is so much filled with the activities that the message just goes at the end of the day. That
Oh, okay.
Continuously flying throughout the day.
So the
from
good morning
day
and
to
good night
night.
text,
Yeah.
basic wala. I think the constant, reassurance that you guys are training so much, each and everything is trained so much.
as part of any other job, it becomes second nature. So it's like,
Correct. Now your family
there's
is...
no message, it's all okay.
कुछ होता तो बता देते tips. Yeah, and the government is putting so many resources into it. Like,
So the apparent risk that you have in military flying that gets subdued because of the training that we impart at academies.
Correct.
So that's the most important part of it, the training.
And as we had brought up that the briefings and debriefs are long, 1 hour, 1 hour, 30 minutes.
That-
So
that
it's
is what
not
it is.
The longest
just
part
that
of sortie is
you,
debrief.
it's not that you just undergo everything on your own. Sometimes the experience of other people teaches you
right.
peer learning, or it's something would have happened with someone, you gain out of that. So it's like the resources are limited, as Sarah brought up. So the amount of experiences you would learn from someone who has experienced it is also teaching you.
Yeah.
That 1 hour or 1 hour 30 minutes is important time. It's not just like it's time getting,
Yeah, correct. Everything is constructive, as they say.
Yeah, and like Ulya brought about the mitigating individual risk.
Correct.
So there's something called mitigating the operational risk also. So there's a system in place while planning the mission. So the mission gets planned like 2-3 days in advance. So you have a operational risk management. There's a sheet
Right.
which has everything like what kind, the kind of seniority that I'm choosing to send that pilot to the mission, the kind of mission it has, the amount of risk that is envisaged in that mission.
Like there's a percentage allotted
Yeah,
to New Zealand.
the scale of that.
Right.
There's a numbering that we do.
Okay.
What kind of environment is there? Like, is it a high altitude sortie, or for helicopters like you brought out? I brought out RRA. So, is it a sortie where there's a lack of
sorry.
rough and restricted?
Yeah, right.
Like there are no helipads en route. So, what kind of aircrew I'm sending up in air,
Right.
and then what kind of weather is envisaged at that time? So, all these things are prepared well in advance, and the numbering is given, and then that is called operational risk management. So we try to bring down the risk as much as possible, but at the end we must remember there's always certain amount of risk that is accepted before sending the aircrew up in air, and certain amount of unidentified risk which is always there, which is natural operational risk.
Correct.
So that's how we mitigate these things.
Understood. So now coming back to the C-130, you were talking that the longest flight you've taken is 6.5 hours.
Yeah, me personally, I've taken 6.5 hours.
The Indian Air Force record would be 13.5. 13 or 30 minutes. Understood. So what do you do when you're flying for such long hours? Like, how do you guys use? Is there a washroom you guys use on board? Is it like a
There
proper?
are provisions on board. We being such a long flying sortie, or it could be that I leave my base in the morning and I reach back at night. So you also carry some sort of food or in-flight meals,
Right.
which we need to. And there are provisions for eating of that food. There are restrooms. So based on the type of aircraft and the rules that are there, the comfort systems are that way designed that the crew is not fatigued because of such kind of factors. If you in fighters, you would find it difficult to carry water even. But
The most difficult part is to see their pre-flight meal in the cockpit. And me, there's a small glove compartment where I could probably put one fruit and one water bottle. And then so when we travel from one place to another, we sometimes, ask them for a drop. So once I saw their cockpit and I saw their meal, I'm like, not fair.
ठीक है मैम 45 minutes के लिए तो it's fine.
So yeah.
In terms of fighter flying, have you ever done mid-air refueling? What exactly is mid-air refueling?
So mid-air refueling comes after you become ops on the aircraft, and
Ops is
ops is you are qualified to
fly that
fly that aircraft
solo.
Not solo. In terms of
Some
war
set
ready.
num- so okay, so
You're
some-
war ready now,
You're war ready,
by
right.
day or by night.
All right.
So once you finish that particular set of syllabus, you have another set of syllabus for air-to-air refueling.
Okay.
So everything, be it an air-to-ground roll or air-to-air roll, you have certain set of syllabus to carry out this particular exercise. So the interesting fact about mid-air refueling is the vicinity of two aircrafts at close proximity and two different type of aircraft. So a transport which travels at a lesser speed to now a fighter which is actually used to flying at higher speeds.
So isn't there like a stall speed difference that might come into play because you're flying relatively slower?
Correct.
So I am playing it that very close regime between stalling speed
And
to normal range speed.
correct.
So an IL-78, which is the tankers which are usually
The Indian Air Force is using.
so the Indian Air Force use, has it's a drogue which is connected to the aircraft.
Right.
So we go close to about 15 meters to this IL-78.
Drogue is what, like a big tube
Okay.
with a funnel at the end.
So if I give an example, petrol pump.
Yeah.
So the pipe which comes from the
Station, yeah, right.
station is the IL,
Is a IL.
and my car pipe is the one which I'm supposed to be connecting to that
Right.
station. In petrol pumps, what happens? The hose comes, the
Yeah,
tank hose
yeah.
comes to the aircraft. Now the car is going to that
Yeah, correct.
tank. So that's what happens in the air. I need to get close to that hose and connect my hose to that aircraft.
Right.
So this happens at a very close proximity.
Correct. 15
So
meters
the
you said from the air.
15 meters from, like, that's the place I'm going to visualize it. And I need to get closer to get in touch with the drone.
Right.
And any small mistake at this particular place can affect my aircraft as well as the
refueling tank.
refueling tanker.
Correct.
So it's a very high risk operation.
Flying is such that you guys are given the liberty to choose a good day or a bad day, right?
Correct.
So if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling
You're
it.
not feeling it.
No questions asked.
Yeah. But the exciting part of air-to-air refueling is, so at that point, if I'm not, it's a matter of stress and also decision making, which keeps happening in the cockpit for a pilot, because now, if I am at a particular fuel figure and I need to take fuel from him, let's take the fact that it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's not happening. I
Yeah.
have made one attempt. The second attempt also is not successful. And this is the last attempt that I'm going to go through. So if that doesn't happen,
You'll have to divert.
I'm already stressed out that I'm not going to make my X destination.
Right.
And I also need to take that decision that I need to go somewhere else. As in, I need to divert to a particular place.
Who's calculating the diversion? Is there like a separate team?
It's all planned on ground.
It is all planned
It's
on
all
ground.
planned. I know my cutoffs.
At
So-
every itna kilometers, if I don't do it, and you're in constant communication with the ATC and
So when you're near the tanker, it is only the tanker and you.
okay.
And all decisions are going to be done by you. Nobody is going to assist you that, okay, you can do this.
Right,
This
right.
decision, you need to take responsibility for that call that you're making.
Understood.
Even for the tankers, I would say, like for them, they have to make it happen, right? So they are carrying the fuel and doing that RV is rendezvous, is a task in themselves. And for them, they even transports needs to carry or cater that bingo fuel. Like
Yeah, even the transport can have that
because
problem.
he is a donor aircraft. He is
Hmm.
giving away their fuel, but
Right.
that's his own auxiliary tank fuel that he has.
Right. So even he or she has to prepare for that.
Yeah, and there is a set of crew in the tankers who are giving away. They're called the gunners, signalers and gunners basically. So they are in charge of operating that drone and who is in communication with the fighter pilot. So it's I would say cooperation between the pilot and the donor aircraft. Right, the transfer happens correctly and at the pre-planned point in a long fail. So that is a
Understood.
task that needs to be pre-planned and thought of.
So coming to helicopter flying, have you ever been part of like rescue missions, HADR? Could you
Yeah,
give us
that's
some
the
insight?
bread and butter of a helicopter pilot. So I have close to 3,000 hours of service experience
Right.
flying and close to 2,000 hours plus on AirH Mark 3,
Right.
which is called the Advanced Light Helicopter and it is made by HU near to your place. Star Aeronautics Limited, and it is indigenous aircraft.
Yeah, right.
So imagine, Vishuddh, you would have gone with your girlfriend or with your colleagues to a place and you want to take her to Leh and you want to plan a trip from Manali to Leh.
Right.
And imagine you are stuck up in between somewhere in the highway
Right.
and suddenly the snowfall took place and you are not able to, you are stuck there for 2-3
Yeah.
days.
Car can't go aage, car
Like
can't
what
go
happened
back.
recently in the last 2-3 months,
Right.
the Manali highway was stuck up. Similar thing happened in August 2018. So I was posted somewhere in UP and there was a call for a HADR mission.
Right. So what is HADR?
So it's humanitarian assistance and disaster relief.
Right.
So it's something like you're stuck up in that highway and now you're stuck there for 2-3 days.
Right.
Imagine it's all snow around you. So what can you do? So it's like all your resources that you have taken in your car, you'll use them. The food is about to get over, the water is about to get over. You'll take assistance from the vehicle which are ahead and back
Yeah. And the locals
and the locals if any. But
in that
highway-
deserted area, nothing is going to be there.
there's nothing there in between. So in August end, September beginning 2018, there was a call for HADR
Right.
to evacuate 6 to 7 people who were stuck up in this highway because of the sudden snowfall which took place in the month of August. Imagine.
Right.
It doesn't happen. So we got airborne from a place from UP and we went to Kullu Manali, the airport. And from there, we conducted the mission for 4 days. And imagine after 5 days, the count was 500 people evacuated, out of which 250 to 300 were evacuated by the administration through the tunnel. And we conducted mission for 3 days and from Baralachla Pass, which is as high as 4.7 kilometers, around 13 to 14,000 feet.
Right.
And there I had the opportunity to evacuate those handsome people and beautiful girls like, you have your friends from there. Actually, there was army base. It is a place called Patsio. And there were like 100 people stuck up there
Right.
and all gathered assistance from army, which was there. But everything was stuck because the snow was not moving at that time. And administration was not able to place the snow clearing machines at that time. So we had to fly, we had to drop food packets, and we had to evacuate people and landed at places, again, RRA.
Right.
There was no place to land. So we found place and landed on the highway and evacuated as much people as we can. Like as the altitude increases, the load carrying capacity of the machine reduces
Why would that be so? Because the air is
because the air is rarer. So
thinner.
like if you would have gone
Thinner.
to high altitude, even you have breathing problems, right?
Right.
So these are the challenges of high altitude flying. So
How does a helicopter work? It pushes the air down.
it beats the air into submission. Actually, so imagine the rotors are rotating.
Right.
It's sucking up the air and throwing it down with some force
Right.
and getting the reaction. Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
And it's flying because of that.
So the higher you go, the tougher it is to
Because
exponentially.
in that packet, there's
Right.
lesser amount of air. The
Right.
molecules are dispersed.
Right.
So it becomes difficult. So the machine is operating at its envelope. The humans are operating at their envelope.
Right.
So it is very challenging. I am flying closer to 18,000 feet, 19,000 feet, 19,000. That's I have highest flown in the glacier, which I told you initially. So imagine a person who's the soldier who's stuck up there for last 10 days because of the weather or
Right.
because of the snow. And there is no help which has reached
No
like in terms of
resources.
ration, in terms of its armament,
Medicine.
and medicine, and specifically in terms of the kerosene oil which he requires every day to live up there.
Correct.
And this is all done by helicopter. And that is the satisfaction that gets into my mind when I feel on his face. Kidla, now the helicopter is here, and now the food will come out of it, the kerosene will come out of it, the medicine. And for the person who's doing duty at that high altitude, and he suffers some
Injury or something.
yeah, injury and something. So that is called casualty evacuation.
All right.
So we go land at those far-flung places and evacuate them in the most expeditious manner and take them to any medical facility.
Wonderful.
Very important part of any pilot's life is the sense of achievement or the pride in the profession. So
Right.
any operational mission gets you that pride in profession, but the sense of achievement is when a common public, any common public citizen is involved in, you are directly impacting their lives. So these HADR missions, the CASEVAC missions, is where the public is actually seeing that what the Air Force is doing.
I'll
Okay.
add on to the same experience which I had. The second one, I carried out HADR from Narmada River in 2021 in the peak of the
Winters.
this corona.
Oh, Corona. Okay.
So the Narmada River got flooded because of the weather changes which happening all around the world. So I had that satisfaction when I landed in that village. It was all marshy below. It was all slush.
Right.
So I had no place to land. So I was holding on to my aircraft on air, you can say. It's like my skid is just touching the ground. I'm not completely on the ground,
Right.
but I'm just holding it, because if I'll lower my collective, in the sense, if I'll put the aircraft down, it'll go inside
Right.
the
The marshy.
muck.
Right.
So I had to hold, that requires certain skills.
Right.
So I'm holding that aircraft with some power, and now my gunner, the one who assists me, he's getting the passengers inside,
Right.
and we are evacuating from them. And once I dropped them at a place and location, and once they went out of my aircraft, they were actually joining their hands towards the aircraft.
Right.
It felt so satisfying that, wow, what a nice work which I'd done, and
Correct. You can
probably
see the
it's equivalent to
difference.
saving someone's life.
Yeah, it is not. It
And,
is. That is
yeah,
not
and
equivalent.
that's the motto of my present unit also,
That
saving
particular-
lives always.
That particular person will remember it for his life, and he'll inspire a set of people that this had happened to me. When he does that story, some youngster, his, let's say, nephew or his
Yeah,
own
yeah,
son,
correct.
listen,
Daughter. Right.
will listen to that, he'll get inspired, and that's how the message is passed.
Understood. C-130s are also used in rescue missions from foreign countries. Has your squadron been part of that?
Yeah. So whenever in case of any war-torn nation,
Right.
the Indian diaspora was stuck out in the that particular nation.
Right.
So there's a need for them to be evacuated. So in the past, what has happened is a suitable airfield has been chosen, and the embassy over there has helped the diaspora to get to that safe location.
Right. To get to that
So,
specific airfield. Yeah.
For us to directly go to that specific city or that place where the civil war or
Conflict has started.
conflict is happening, but it has happened that they're taken to a particular suitable place. We have been stationed at a nearby friendly country's base,
Yeah.
and finding a suitable. The C-130 operates at night also with NVGs, that is night vision goggles.
Right.
So in a no moon night, moon is required. There's some sort of moonlight or starlight is required for NVGs. But even in no moon, dark phase, basically the time where there is no light in the sky at night.
Right.
So at that point, using NVGs, C-130s have gone to such war-torn nation and rescue the Indian diaspora from that, but a suitable airfield or a suitable landing strip, as I covered earlier. Even these are operational missions, but I would like to also tell about one of the Medivac missions. So a medical aircraft gets priority, right? So correct. What had happened was, if we were already airborne on a particular mission, and mid-flight we got a message from the radar controller that you need to contact your Air Force agencies. We contacted them, and we got a message to go to a city in northern India.
Yeah.
And upon landing there, we were not told initially what it is. Once we landed there, we got a message that we have to carry a live organ. A live organ transplant needed to be done for a particular receiver who was in need of it in Delhi.
Right.
So a suitable donor had suddenly come up, and the organ was using a green corridor.
Right.
By green corridor, what I mean is that the organ got, with the aid of civil authorities and district administration, the organ reached the airfield at the fastest speed possible. We landed there in time, got the organ, PL to Delhi. The receiver was in need of it, and the patient lived
Right.
because of that organ transplant.
Understood. So the Indian Air Force.
Saving lives is not just in a war-torn nation. It could also be within the country.
Within the country.
And the sense of achievement, as he was also saying, is
Right.
the highest in such.
Does that shows the flexibility and reach of Air Force?
Correct.
Taking the commitment in air and the long distances that
Long
can
And this also happened in the hours where the human efficiency is at the lowest. I would like to add upon that there's a period called WOCM, window of circadian glow. So human body is designed to operate in a certain
Specific number of hours.
hours, and the hours also matter like when it is in the day. If I tell a normal man to start working from night 12 o'clock to morning 5 o'clock, he won't be that efficient.
Right.
See how you would be efficient in the day hours, right?
Correct.
But undertaking such dynamic operations, versatile operations, which are now this is where the skill or the experience,
The training of the crew comes out.
you could not be prepared for this, right?
Right.
Patient came mid-air, so you have to land, take the organs. There's something called NOTAS, notice to airman, which we need to be aware of. Like, let's say I've been told to go to a certain airfield. I need to know that are the watchers there? Is that airfield open? It can't happen that I show up there and the ATC is off there.
Right. So everything is communicated to you beforehand, and you have to calculate on the field.
ATCs on the ground also assist you that
Right.
the airfield will be made active. But then, operating in that hours of the WOCL that I mentioned, right, or circadian glow is tricky, it's challenging. And this mission in particular was carried out in the WOCL hours, that is from 0200 to 0600, the 4 hours of midnight,
Right.
are where the
Peak hours.
body is at its lowest efficiency.
Everybody are working day in, day out. They do it daily, and they have actual situations where they actually interact with the civilians.
Right.
Whereas fighters are training day in, day out to deliver the weapons on that D-Day.
Again.
But if you understand, all three of us are working towards one common goal, is nation first, and we will always be there when it is required.
Understood.
So we say that nation's safety, welfare, and honor comes first,
Right.
and then the safety, welfare, and honor of the men that we command, and then in the end, it is our own comfort and welfare that comes.
Right. So there's a set protocol that you guys follow, that the mission comes
It's
first.
like the commitment. It's like service before self.
Service before self. Understood. All right. Coming back to the briefings, you said that for 45 minutes of flying, you have a 2-3 hour long debrief. But I'm assuming the debrief doesn't stop at the briefing room. Back home, once you're home, you're, in a social gathering, the briefing continues.
So what happens in a debrief sometimes continues in the social gathering, because when you have the same breed of people at the same place, we eventually
You're
start.
bound to come up with the same
Yeah,
topic.
we end up saying that, the maneuver was done so beautifully. I aligned myself exactly to the road.
Right.
I took a kiloneo today. And, probably rejoicing about that over the same social event.
Right.
And the best part is when we don't see the ranks at these points,
Right.
when we're doing debrief or when we're at social gatherings, if we are enjoying a particular moment of the sortie, we don't look at or try to demean a junior or a senior at
Right.
the same place. We're trying to appreciate and also bring out some learning points at the
Some
same
constructive
place.
criticism at the same time
Yes.
to walk you through. All right. Coming to the social life, social events, is it all work, no play? Or how does it go? Is there a balance that you maintain?
So we work hard and we party hard. So there's a joke towards the social gathering. Like if you're as a civilian, you're attending a social gathering where a fighter pilot and a helicopter pilot is there. How do you know that he or she is a fighter pilot? He or she will tell you that I'm a fighter pilot. No. The joke is, how do you know that he or she is a helicopter pilot?
The fighter pilot will tell
Yeah,
who is the helicopter
exactly.
pilot. Correct.
So we do have social gatherings. We
Right.
have a lot of occasions, and yes, we do follow. We work a lot. We work hard, and yes, we party hard. We enjoy. We definitely enjoy. We lose out. We stress. The stress which builds up.
Parties could be for different occasions. It could be a cultural party, any festival. It could be for a send-off of some particular person whom you are working with for the last 4-5 years.
Right.
To give him a grand send-off, there's a party. Or for any achievement that a particular person would have had in the recent last 2 or 3 weeks. Or
If
month.
everything is celebrated.
Let's say for promotion up to on the next rank or upgradation of in a service.
Right.
So it's celebrated in a particular way.
The little moments are celebrated to keep
It's
out.
not work. It's a balance of work and
And it's not party also always. We have a lot of sports events which are conducted by the station itself, where you're working on team spirit and also involving yourself. See, there are different branches in an entire station. So if you are actually, especially when we're in squadrons, we are in our own cocoon.
Right.
So it is very important for us to interact with the rest of the members of the station.
Correct.
So we have a lot of games. There are inter-unit sports competitions where we are working as a team and also having a good time with
Time, right.
the other part of our team.
Which is the next sport event that you're looking forward to?
Badminton.
Badminton. We'll play badminton.
Yeah.
Right.
So we say that Air Force is not only a profession; it's a lifestyle. It's a way of life.
Correct.
So there are a lot of resources in a station. Like she brought out about sports. So we have from squash, we have football courts, we have swimming pools,
Right.
and we have badminton courts, lawn tennis also. So a lot of things are there. A lot of
Understood.
activities are there which you can choose.
So the Air Force looks after like the holistic development of any.
It's not only for you; it's for your family also. It's for your kids also.
Right.
Like I have 2 kids,
Right.
9 and 4 year.
Yeah.
So the elder one he goes for coaching classes of football. So there are coaching classes for drawing also, music also, instrument also. So a lot of things are there in the station.
Understood. So the Air Force makes sure that they take care of everything else so that you are only focused on the mission.
Yeah. And the best part is, so when you feel that you're joining the Air Force, you feel that in case you're a sports person who's been into nationals or international events once before you join the Air Force.
Right.
So once you come to the Air Force actually gives you opportunities to participate in you represent the country in a lot of competitions, even though your profession could be XYZ in the Air Force.
Right.
So if you're good at it, you are going to have certain selection procedures, and then you can actually represent
The
India
country.
through Air Force
Perfect.
in different events. There are a lot of examples for that.
Understood. All right. Ma'am, you were talking about air shows. Were air shows your first introduction to the Indian Air Force?
Yeah. So the air show, which was conducted back in Mysore, it was when I was in my 9th grade. So there is a Dasara event that happens in Mysore, which is very famous.
Right.
So that was the first time that Air Force did a fly past over Mysore.
Right.
And the audience were excited to see, the Air Force fly past over that particular area. And my dad had taken me just to show me.
Right.
And as I mentioned, that was my first time asking, Papa, can I fly this?
Mm.
So I was super excited. So when I came back, the first thing I was like, if I want to be an Air Force pilot.
Right.
So that time, we used to have those wide, big computers where...
Box color.
So I was like, how to join the Indian Air Force.
Right.
The first thing which comes up in the search engine is Air Force School, Pune. Now, a ninth grader, okay, I think when I click the link and like, okay, Air Force School, Pune. So first thought process of me, I have to go to Air Force School, Pune.
Pune.
I need to finish my education here and then only I can become a pilot.
Right.
Minute I walked out of the room, I told my mom, Mama, I'm leaving school. I need to go to Air Force School, Pune, and I need to become a pilot.
Pilot.
So that's where it started. And my dad and mom were like, what is she saying? Suddenly, why is this change of school? And I was very serious about it. Right. I was so sure that Air Force it is, and I am leaving school tomorrow. Not going to school tomorrow.
Ab to Pune hi joining hogi.
Pune joining me. Then later, it took
You
some
got to know.
counseling. People telling me that no, this is not the way. And of course, I told you about how NCC oriented me through that journey.
So, what about you? Were your parents supportive of you joining the Indian Air Force?
Yeah, they were supportive, but like as I'm the only side of my parents, so initially they told me that you just finish off the graduation first. And the thing is that I told you I come from a civilian background. I did not have the particular guidance to join ND at that point of time in my life. So I did not go through the National Defense Academy exam and the SSB at that point of time. So I completed my graduation. Again, I also took some guidance from people, from someone who was already in service, some seniors from college who were
Joined the Indian Air Force.
in Navy, Air Force.
Right.
So thereafter, I got to know what is to be done, what's not to be done.
Right.
And I gave AFAT exam.
Vishnu, like 10 years, when I got commissioned in 2010, I started preparation in 2006 and 7. There was not much awareness about how to join Air Force.
Right.
It was like, I told you, it was all self-search through the newspapers and guidance from my
The teachers.
Nowadays, it is like you have Disha available, which is giving you all the information online.
Lack of information is the biggest shortage that any organization will face. And
And now probably when you type how to join the Air Force, I think the first link that would be is the Drisha.
All right. So recruitment at Air Force School Pune has gone down a little bit. Is there any message that you have for the aspirants or for the people watching the podcast, sir?
For the youngsters who are finishing their graduation or about to finish their graduation, since the availability of information now through Disha or through AFAT website or through multiple sources is there in the on the internet, right? So what needs to be an individual completing his college needs to have clarity of thought, needs to be serious, needs to be aware of the global
Scenario, what is happening?
And with that, I think any aspirant who wants to join the Indian Air Force has abundant information out there, there's sufficient guidance available out there.
Correct.
And if you're serious,
It's a good career
it's
path
a
to
good
follow.
career to go.
All right, ma'am, would you like to add?
Yeah, so I think at the age where you're writing your AFCAT or you're on your final degree,
Right.
as he said, now the options are so much that the first task in hand for that youngster is to take a decision
Correct.
on which path should I choose. Because now, even if you're finishing your engineering or any other degree, you have other options which you can take, even though you don't want to get into the mainstream of engineering or get into the corporate world.
Right.
The first point is take that decision. Once you've taken what you want to choose, now you actually have to understand what is in store for you.
Right.
Like what, after joining, what are your perspectives? What are you going to experience? And then start working towards it. Because I've met so many people at this age when they ask that how do I join the Air Force is the first question.
Right.
Now, what is in store for me is the second part.
Correct.
Where how do I know what is it correct for me or is it not? So without knowing that knowledge, if you take that decision, then probably it is going to be difficult for you.
Right.
Seeing the Odai that you're talking about in real action, and the thing is that this is required. It's a must. It's necessary if you want to have a comfortable career, a safe flying experience. So
Correct.
that Odai is necessary. It's not that it's a burden on you.
Yeah, right.
It will the studying is what will get you comfortable in the cockpit.
Right.
So it's all must do and should do.
Must do and should do.
And my message to the youth is make an informed choice. And once you have made it, work hard for it. Don't give up. Because believe me, once you have earned these wings, you'll always walk the earth with your eyes skywards. Because there you have been, and there will always belong to return. Because it's a very different feeling. It's a paradigm shift. It's a perspective change. You look down from top. The perspective really changes.
Correct. All right. Thank you so much, guys, for coming on this podcast. If we have missed out on some questions, I urge the audience, please write down your comments in the comment section below, and we will try our best to answer them. Thank you.